nothing really moves the needle until you take action. So a lot of companies just get started and build all sorts of fancy dashboards, and then like nobody takes action, nothing happens, and then they wonder why is the cost, why is the inefficiency still there, why is the cost dropping?
Welcome to FinOps in Action. I'm your host, Taylor Hauk. Each week, I'll sit down with FinOps experts to explore the toughest challenges between FinOps and engineering. This show is brought to you by Point 5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with deep detection and remediation tools that actually drive action. Hello, and welcome to another episode of FinOps in Action. Today's guest has seen cloud cost optimization from almost every angle. He started his career over 20 years ago in systems engineering and spent time at companies like Nokia and Here Technologies before joining AWS as a senior specialist solutions architect focused on EC2, Spot, and Graviton. In 2016, he built AutoSpotting, an open source cloud cost optimization tool that has helped more than 10,000 customers save money on EC2. Then he went and built something of his own. Today, he is the founder and cloud optimization specialist at Leaner Cloud, where he works hands-on with mid-sized companies to optimize their cloud environments. Cristian, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Taylor. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I actually was really looking forward to this episode, Cristian, because I think that you have about as much hands-on experience optimizing cloud environments as anyone in the world. What is the number one thing that you wish that every organization knew about FinOps and cloud optimization?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that people need to know, but nothing really moves the needle until you take action. So a lot of companies just get started and build all sorts of fancy dashboards, and then nobody takes action, nothing happens, and then they wonder why is the cost, why is the inefficiency still there, why is the cost dropping? So I think it's very important to be hands-on and taking action as much as possible on the insights that you get from all of these dashboards. I'm not saying they are wrong. It's just that it's just half of the story. People have to also pay attention to them and do the work that needs to be done as a result of those. Of course, there's always a lot of the things can be automated, so you can always have some help from the automation that exists in this space. And as you said, I've been building tooling for this since very early on. And I'm a big fan of the automation, but then again, automation can only go so far. There's always some gaps or things that you need to do, taking over from where automation leaves you. And then kind of what I do is kind of bridging this gap between what can automation do and what actually needs to be done to cover everything properly. So yeah, that's basically what I do nowadays.
I think that's such an important insight, right? Because so much of, the FinOps industry is centered around cost visibility, cost reporting, cost allocation. But what do you actually do with those insights? That's what's important. That's what actually changes something. You can look at the data all you want, but if nothing changes, what's the point? How do you drive action? How do you ensure that engineering teams are able to actually act on the insights that FinOps brings to them?
My specialty is more into the companies that basically don't even they don't have anything at the point where they involve me in their setup. So most of the times they just have the default dashboards from Cost Explorer, and basically I take them from that level, from level 0, and I go hand in hand with them and take actions, looking to the things that can be done and drive the entire implementation together with them. But at the same time, I do it as a service. So I kind of try to offload as much as possible of the gory details, if I can call it like this, or the boring things that maybe it's not the best use of their time. Things like just optimizing GP2 volumes, those tiny things that maybe doesn't worth their time and attention, I can take care of them with automation and like making sure that everything is implemented in the right way. Um, yeah, there's always like processes that they need to follow. So like maybe infrastructure code, avoiding drift and stuff like that, which is a big topic of what I'm actually working these days. Um, yeah, so like rolling out changes in a lot of um, environments, like they have maybe hundreds of databases that need to be right sized or yeah, like converted from x86 to Graviton, for example. Yeah, and like all sorts of misconfigurations or inefficiencies that could move a bit the needle. That's in the end, they add up to significant amounts of money, but then individually, each one of them maybe not worth it for them to do themselves, or they're just maybe too busy or don't know all the details that they could take action on.
Engineering bandwidth is oftentimes the most scarce resource that we have.
Yeah.
What do you think is the right way to work with engineers to make sure that they're paying attention to the highest and best use optimization opportunities that are at their disposal and not getting distracted by perhaps the small things that could be optimized?
So there's always like prioritization that needs to be done. You cannot just go to the engineer with like a $5 opportunity and expect them to take action. They will always say, yeah, this makes no sense. Like, come to me like next year or when you have something bigger. But at the same time, there are things that maybe fall through the cracks that are more like sizable. And yeah, so I think it's very important for the teams to have in place all these insights and dashboards that give them like like an idea of where they stand and what could they do, like the most impactful things they could do. And then actually having the bandwidth and the allocated time to work on those insights and drive some results, because just as I said, just knowing them and doing nothing doesn't help.
I want to drill into the topic of automation a little bit because you've already mentioned it a few times. How do you think about automation as it pertains to remediating cloud inefficiencies? Because I'll tell you something that I've heard and thought about in the past, and it's the fact that, you know, when you are taking an action to change a cloud resource, whether it's a configuration change, whether it's actually resizing an instance or something, there is some inherent risk to the performance of an application when you go and change something on the infrastructure side. How do you think about automation and ensuring that automated actions don't introduce unnecessary risk?
It happened before, like even as part of my work, it happened that maybe we went a bit too far. So, but in the end, it's we should see this as an ongoing iterative process. Sometimes you notice something, you say, okay, this is completely oversized, and then you configure it maybe too small, and yeah, that can uncover problems, and there's like always a risk of doing too aggressive. I think what helps is also like taking it step by step, like not like if you have something that's running at 2% utilization, you don't right size it all the way down. Maybe you cut it in half at first and then like let it run like that for a while, and then maybe see if, okay, how does it go afterwards? Maybe cut it again in half, but not like go all the way, like cut it in like 8 times from a single step. I mean, it's not rocket science. There's always like these low hanging fruits, like right sizings and like small misconfigurations or suboptimal configurations. But yeah, it's like being a bit cautious and erring in the how can I say, towards caution rather than over optimizing from the first attempt. That's why kind of like I like to work with customers for a longer time. That gives us more time to, okay, like iterate and come up with something that actually makes sense. not just tell them to cut their instance in 8 or whatever. So like just see how much can we squeeze it, but without introducing too much risk.
Talk to me about the people aspect, right? Because I imagine that when you come in and you're working with the client, you're going to be working closely with, many of the folks on their engineering team. Who are the personas that you're working most closely with, and how do you collaborate with them in a way where, you are taking their perspective and specific knowledge about the actual applications that, are running in the cloud, and ensure that that is taken into consideration as you propose optimization opportunities?
Engagements I had were with technical people from the engineering team, maybe DevOps engineers, platform engineers, even like senior developers that know very well their application. So basically, we like when I come up with something, I always like discuss it with them. Like, does this even make sense for you guys to do? Of course, there are some like low hanging fruits that maybe don't warrant much of a conversation, and we just say, yeah, we need to do this, and then we do it. But there are things sometimes that needs to be discussed. Okay, like a recent example was converting some databases from Aurora I optimized back to Aurora standard. And yeah, there were like cases that added up to a few $1,000s a month, but they were like more a conscious decision in a way that they try to like they see it more as of a sort of insurance, paying a little more for Aurora I optimized, even where it's not necessarily needed. But like, yeah, like discussing this kind of aspects, like explaining all the pros and cons of the options and seeing what actually makes sense for them.
When you think back on your experience, have you ever worked with a client where you had a proposal that you are, let's say, very confident in, right? But perhaps an engineer or someone within their organization pushes back on that due to risk? How do you handle those types of conversations, and what's the balance?
A recent example for that was when we were trying to optimize some EBS volumes. So we had a bunch of IO2 or IO1 volumes that we wanted to propose converting to GP3. And when looking at the metrics, like the volumes were pretty idle, like most of the time, and then occasionally they had some IO going on. They had always some like very tiny IOPS, but there was like very, very little load. But in the end, it turned out they didn't want that because of latency concerns. So because like GP3 has increased latency, and the application itself is very latency sensitive, so we opted to keep them as IO1 instead of converting to GP3. So like there's also all these kinds of insights that maybe from outside looks like you could do them, but sometimes, yeah, we realize it's not really a good option. But then what we can do is like making sure that we configure the IOPS and throughput as much as like is actually needed, like right sizing within that particular kind of configuration, because it was initially kind of severely oversized also from that perspective. So that was how we eventually like brought the cost down, but not being able to go all the way to the like more optimal configuration the way we saw it initially because of these application latency concerns.
I think it's important for the listeners to really digest and understand this, because oftentimes people that are solely focused on FinOps, you can call it FinOps, you can call it cost optimization, people where cost is the primary metric that they care about and are thinking about when they're looking at a cloud environment, they're prone, especially earlier on in their journeys, to dismiss or not even consider alternative metrics or alternative benefits of being on a certain configuration or resource or architecture. I mean, you used the word earlier, insurance, right? Oftentimes it can be a bit of an insurance policy to be over provisioned. Sometimes you have HA or DR scenarios where you need infrastructure that appears idle from the outside looking in, but it actually is critical to have that in place in a situation where you need to fall back on that. You need it to be there depending on what the application is. So it's really important to take that perspective into consideration and be open to other perspectives, even if it appears that there are easy cost savings to be achieved by taking an action. But that being said, there are many, many, many times where you can take an action and you will reduce cost significantly, and there is absolutely no impact to performance or availability or scalability or security. And in these cases, that's like what we're here for, right? Is like, how do I find somewhere to just take an action and save $1 million annualized, save $250,000 annualized, save $10 million annualized, all depending on the scale of the environment. Cristian, I want to touch on this though, and kind of look back on your experience and all the environments that you worked with. What are the scenarios and the cost savings wins that stick out to you when you look back? And are there any that have come up time and time again?
Touching back on what you said with like, you can do it and like you can get lower costs. Sometimes you can get lower costs while actually also improving performance, which is like a double win. I mean, there were cases like, I think the best that comes to mind was not so long ago, there was a database configuration that was like serverless Aurora. And basically, like if you know about serverless Aurora, you can like see how the costs are like about 3.5 times more than provisioned Aurora for the same size. And it's a very useful configuration if your workload is like very bumpy when it comes to traffic. Like in case you're running idle for like 99% of the time, but then there's this time of the day or when something comes and you're flooded with a lot of requests, and it scales very quickly to serve such peaks or bursts in traffic. But if your traffic is completely flat and you're using it, basically you're paying that premium for no benefits. And we've seen such a use case for one of my clients, and basically we converted it overnight, like you can just quickly convert it to a provision database. It just needs a simple failover. And what we noticed afterwards was that actually latency got significantly better because this provision database has like maybe a better tenancy guarantee than the serverless equivalent. It could also be that they run on more recent instance types, so faster hardware. But like what we got was like cost decrease of like three times, because we kept kind of within the same capacity size as we were getting before, but also we got performance by like 30% better than before, just by switching to this.
That's an incredible story, and something that, it's important to recognize that there are opportunities where you can actually reduce cost and improve performance, and reducing cost by a factor of 3 is that's a significant improvement, right? When you think about the underlying, application and what it's doing, you're essentially making it much more productive asset, and the ROI of hosting that database is increased greatly. It has a significant business impact when you're able to make a change like that.
Yeah, and this was like something that was costing like $12K or so a month, and initially and in the end we got it to about $4K, and with faster performance. So yeah, it almost saved the cost of an engineer. I mean, they don't they have a bit engineers in more lower cost areas. So it was pretty impactful for the customer for just a couple of changes.
Are there any waste patterns or inefficiencies that you see come up over and over and over again?
Yeah, I mean it's always the usual suspects like oversized capacity, idle resources, suboptimal configurations for like storage volumes. These Aurora I optimized, the Aurora serverless where it's not actually needed or not a good fit. The like even support costs for databases if we can get them upgraded to the recent versions. So it's not really like not rocket science, but there's always these things that many of them are tiny in absolute value, but they add up to significant dollar figures over the entire estate of the customer.
It's funny because I think that a lot of what we do, I've done this type of work for many years, is you look at the resources, you find the top spend resources, you look at their configurations, you look at the utilization of these different, services and try to understand, hey, is there an opportunity here? How can we maybe use the utilization metrics to determine the optimal configuration? But in our prep call, Cristian, you were mentioning that sometimes it's not always what it seems. I think there was a story with Aurora that you told me where you had a particular insight based on utilization, but under the covers, there was a different scenario. Can you maybe tell us about that story and what the result of it was?
It was about a year ago when I first got started with the client, and the first thing I did was looking at their bill and see the top spenders, and RDS was always. I mean, as most of my clients, RDS tends to be one of the biggest. And within their RDS, I noticed massive costs coming from IO, like Aurora IO costs. And I traced them down to a single database. Basically, it was costing them about $30K a month for a single database, just the IO costs. Whereas the entire database was like the infrastructure, the instance itself was about maybe $1,000 or $2,000. So the IO was like more than an order of magnitude bigger than the compute and storage for that database. And it turned out after I flagged it to the engineers to see what's going on, how much because we couldn't actually change it to I optimized since it was running an old database engine. So the conversation turned more into, okay, how can we get this database updated to the latest version of the engine? And then one thing led to the other, and we realized that database was actually not really needed anymore. So the customer was paying for something that one of their clients kept using, but that client was like discontinued or something like that. Like they weren't supposed to be using it anymore. So in like just a few weeks, we managed to shut it down. So we got like 30+K a month in savings just from like turning it off.
I think of this story, Cristian, it really paints the picture of whether you want to call it FinOps or cloud optimization or this role that we play in looking at, cloud environments and understanding the cost impacts. It's not all just within the engineering organization. There's a broader business context that's really important to bring into the picture. And that's where you can move from, hey, let's change the configuration and save 30% or even more than 30% to actually the underlying reason this database is running is not valid and we can just get rid of it.
Yeah.
I want to shift gears a little bit with you, Cristian, and talk about another topic, which is realizing and showing the value of the work that we do. One of the benefits that we have in FinOps, in cloud optimization, is the benefits, the value is very real. It's tangible, right? You can track it to a realized cost saving, but oftentimes you can perform an action that reduces costs on a specific workload, but the overall cloud bill could still be growing for a number of reasons. So tracking the value of this work is difficult. How do you think about quantifying the value of cloud cost optimization efforts?
I mean, for me, it's particularly important to quantify this kind of impact, because the way I charge my clients is based on savings. So I charge a fraction of the savings that we agree on, and if I don't deliver savings, basically I don't make money. So it's my incentive to like track the savings accurately, and like try to come up with like ways that actually make sense, that we can deliver like meaningful results. And it was like I had a case at some point in the past where I was like explaining how I do it. Like I just generate savings for your infrastructure, basically in plain English. And we started to work, and then within the first few months, we got like significant savings in like the range of 30% of their footprint. But the thing is that this client had been on a kind of explosive growth for the last year or so. Their costs have been growing like almost double in 12 months. So the growth was continuing throughout my time with them, and basically they just couldn't see how like the results that I'm driving and the figures that I'm helping optimize didn't materialize entirely in their bill, because their bills kept growing, and like there was always like a bit less savings, let's say in absolute number, compared to what we were expecting. I mean, they were expecting more. And the thing was, like, even after I finished my work, it was kind of a bad coincidence that my backlog was like, okay, I finished the work, and then soon after they had like Black Friday, which increased the traffic a lot. So their costs exploded, and they also at the same time had been going into a re-architecture of the application, converting from EC2 to Fargate. And if in case you're not familiar, Fargate like has this extra cost on logging compared to EC2. In EC2, they were just logging to the disk, so there was no cost. But as they were migrating to Fargate, kind of at the same time with this Black Friday event, they had a lot of costs coming right after I finished my work. They switched to Fargate and had Black Friday, and their costs went way over what I managed to achieve in savings. So we had an interesting conversation afterwards, and like I was like, okay, yeah, we got some results, but then things went completely over. So yeah, that was an experience. The way I started to make like it clear afterwards that like it's not necessarily absolute savings, but it's like cost avoidance compared to how much you would be paying if you take no action. Because everything that I did was still generating savings for them. Like they didn't revert any of the work, but like they just had more traffic, and then like a different architecture for some application that exploded the cost.
Look, if you're just running a cloud environment and things are very static, and you go and you do cloud optimization efforts, you're going to see your total bill go down, of course. But on the other hand, if you are growing, if you're seeing increases in traffic, if you're deploying new applications, even if you are optimizing your existing infrastructure, you could still see your total costs go up. When I was working at NBC Universal, we called it self-funding growth. And essentially what we would do is we were a big enterprise. We had a very large cloud budget, right? And the budget was set at the beginning of the year. This is how much, we have allocated in your organization's budget to spend on the cloud, right? Pretty simple. Now, throughout the year, we would always have an influx of, there's essentially demand for more cloud services to be used, right? But we only had the budget that was allocated to us. So what do? We embark on cost optimization efforts on the existing infrastructure, reduce that spend, and use those savings to reinvest back into these new projects. Now, it's interesting though, because as an outsider, right, imagine you are an executive or you are a finance person that is not in the weeds, and you're hearing like, oh, apparently these guys are doing all this work in optimization and have saved so many millions of dollars, but now it's the end of the year and the bill is the same. So obviously, they didn't do anything that important, but you're missing the piece, which is what you get out of the cloud is value, right? And when you are doing more and spending the same, it's the same thing as reducing the spend, right? Essentially, if these actions hadn't taken place exactly as you just described, then the cost would have been much higher. It's not that we're not still getting the benefit from the optimization. It's just that we are also doing more that then led to the cost being the same or oftentimes even higher potentially.
I think it boils down to like the concept of unit economics, which at the time, like I knew about it, but didn't really feel like, okay, this is how I should describe this situation. But yeah, it is a way to measure the efficiency, like how how you can get more from the same spend. Yeah, like you describe, you invest, you can do more investments for the same amount of money.
Absolutely. Now, Christian, I do want to shift gears slightly as we move towards the end of the episode and talk about AI. I think it's a very hot topic right now, and I feel that a lot of us are feeling that the capabilities of these models are exploding and making us much more productive. I'm super curious from your perspective how you're seeing AI shaping the capabilities of you as an individual, and also how you think about AI spend and optimizing those types of workloads.
I mean, when it comes to using the AI for productivity increases, when I went on my own, like I think it was within a few months that ChatGPT 3.5, or was it 3.5 the first version? Like it was released in 23 at around Christmas, and I got very early on and started to use it to generate code, but basically from the browser, just copy pasting from the browser to the IDE. Like I had this manual workflow for a while, but I basically stopped writing code for all my tooling development soon after I got that first version of ChatGPT, and it was kind of working for relatively small files. So if you could have like maybe a file for around 200, 300 lines, it could handle it and do refactorings inside it, and then like pasting the entire file, and then I copy paste it from the browser to the IDE. And then I was kind of in this loop of always like looking for ways to improve my work to AI, and like went and kept this kind of workflow, but the models kept getting better and better within the browser until last summer, where like I had built even some tooling that can take the entire project, copy it into clipboard with each file separated by file names, and the model was able to like take that input and like drive refactorings and just give back certain files, and I would just copy certain files to the IDE. So I've been doing this for like maybe a year or 2 years until I got my hands first on this Cloud Code. And the first time I used Cloud Code, I was disappointed because it was pretty aggressive in like just reading like the first 50 lines of the files. So it was not really meaningfully, like it couldn't meaningfully understand what's going on in that file.
When was this?
Maybe June last year.
June of 2025.
Yeah. So I got back to my browser where you could just paste 10,000 lines of code into the browser, into the Claude window, and get entire 500 lines or 1,000 lines files refactored with as per my request. So then I went back to that for a few more months, and then I got back in September or October. I gave it another try with Cloud Code, and then it just worked way better. And then I kept working on like improving my workflow, and like have been using it a lot, especially with the last model 4.6. In November, I got on that, and like within a few weeks, basically I built in AutoSpotting, because I keep working on AutoSpotting even like 10 years now. It's been 10 years around this time since I started the project and first talked about it online. And then in that, like in a few weeks, basically I got to build functionality that previously I was building maybe in a year or two combined. So now I'm very close to releasing the next version that will have like a web interface with multi-account support, and like it's even gonna work as a SaaS. So I'm building like a SaaS of sorts for AutoSpotting, whereas previously it was just running within a single account. Basically I use the AI for that, and also like build all the time I built new tools. I have like 30 plus tools for various optimizations. Around reInvent, I released an open source tool for RI and savings plan purchase automation based on the recommendations from the cost explorer. And within the last few weeks, basically I built a web interface for that. So it's going to work more like a fully automated purchase engine based on recommendations coming from AWS Cost Explorer, like stacking the purchases over time and renewing the purchases automatically, so you don't have to worry. So this is kind of the work that I've been doing for like open source and like product work, but also like always building tools for my customer engagements. Like just recently, like this week, I've been working on an Aurora IO optimized configuration drift avoidance optimization. So basically, you configure the IO optimized flag in a way that avoids infrastructure code drift, completely automated. So that next time you run Terraform, basically Terraform doesn't see any drift, which is what I've been working on lately. So there's like a lot of benefit when it comes to the like being how much I'm able as a single guy, like a solo agency or solo like software vendor of sorts, how much I can achieve. It's massive compared to what I've been able to do when I first got started like 3.5 years ago. So it's like at least an order of magnitude more output per unit of time, if I can quantify it like that.
It's absolutely amazing and mind blowing. I mean, I've been using these tools as well and had a similar kind of realization as you. I mean, I almost feel that in today's day and age, and also if you just assume any rate of improvement, which I think is inevitable, it's just your mind can get blown with thinking of where it's going. But it's like an individual has the abilities of a team, right? And then a team has the abilities of like a department, right? And it's pretty mind blowing, and it's going to be really interesting, Cristian, to see where things go and how it's going to impact our industry. We didn't even get a chance to talk about the growing amount of AI costs that are coming, but we'll have to save that one for next time. Cristian, this has been such a fantastic episode. To our listeners, where can they find you?
Yeah, I think the best is on LinkedIn. I mean, I'm there pretty active, but also I have my website Linear Cloud. So in case somebody wants to check out I have also like a YouTube channel where I was posting in the past some optimization, let's say, focused posts and podcasts and stuff like that. I'm not really maintaining those anymore, but it's still there. So yeah, linearcloud.com is the entry point.
Awesome. Everyone, check that out. Cristian, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, Taylor. All the best.
Absolutely. And thank you to our audience. If you got something out of today's conversation, please share this episode with someone that needs to hear it. This has been another amazing episode of FinOps in Action. We'll see you next time. That wraps up another episode of FinOps in Action. Thank you for joining. For show notes and more, please visit finopsinaction.com. This show is brought to you by Point 5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with deep detection and remediation tools that actually drive action.